Thank you for joining. And now, please welcome former United States Senator from Arizona, Jeff Flake.
I'm pleased to be here today to discuss who I'll be supporting for president and why. It was the honor of my life to represent my state, Arizona, my family's home, in the United States Senate and House for 18 years. I'm a conservative. I've always felt that my conservative beliefs and values are best expressed in the Republican Party. I was a Republican long before the president ever called himself one, and I'll be a Republican long after identifying as such is no longer useful to him. Principle does not go in and out of fashion, does not chase ratings or play to the base or care much about polls. And principle is a provenance of no one party. That is one of the things I'm here to talk about today. The other thing I'm here to talk about is the future, both of my party and, more importantly, the future of our country. I was raised on a cattle ranch in northern Arizona, Goldwater country. When I was a kid, the Republican Party under President Reagan was brimming with ideas, full of purpose and principle. It was coherent and inspiring and idealistic, so much so that it awakened the imagination of a kid from the town of Snowflake and a whole generation of other kids just like him. Made us think big thoughts and of our place in the world and of what it meant to be an American in America, the shining city on a hill. With Reagan, a conservative's vision of America as the indispensable nation was benevolent and big-hearted, a beacon to the striver and the subjugated, and to those locked behind the ideological wall that divided the world into free and oppressed. It was morning in Reagan's America. It wasn't perfect, but it was always getting better. We were the sum of our goodness, not our gripes, of our resolve, not our resentments. I got into public service believing that for our politics to be healthy, the American government needed people who believed as I do, but also people who believed differently from me. This has become somewhat of a novel idea, but it is the genius of our founders that the Constitution forces compromise. Governing is hard. Democracy is hard. Decency shouldn't be that hard, but apparently it is. You know what is easy? Name-calling, demagoguery. The politics of vengeance is easy. Dehumanization requires very little talent. By raging at each other, our minds vacant of reason and reeling with ill will, with tinfoil hat conspiracy theories, we've given in to the horrible tribal impulse to mistake our opponents for our enemies, then become seized with a conviction that we must destroy that enemy, seemingly oblivious to the fact that not only are we not enemies, we are each vital organs in the same body. It is as if in order to save itself, your brain decided to destroy your heart. That's about the level of care we are currently bringing to the proceedings. There is a sickness in our system, and we've infected the whole country with it. We are all old enough to remember when we elected presidents who spoke to our highest ideals and aspirations of a nation, not to our deepest dystopian fears. I can remember when, once an election was settled, the new president would reach out the hand to those who had opposed him and pledge to do right by all Americans, not just those who were loyal to him. That's the way presidents once sought to lead and to govern. In fact, it's the way every other president in the modern era, Republican or Democrat, tried to conduct himself in office. Each possessed a keen awareness that a president's principal role is not to serve himself or his interests or the interests of his clan, but the people of the United States. That was once the American way. Those of us of a certain age in this country have also had the rare good fortune of growing up and into adulthood not having to think too much about the consequences of our votes, or even whether we voted at all in a given election. For our entire lives, through some very fractious political periods, we have taken steady self-governance for granted. And that is a luxury that so many of our fellow human beings living in other countries have never had for a single day in their lives. But the story of the past 3.5 years is a story of the power that we vest in the presidency and the consequences when a president does not use that power well. And these times prove the folly of taking anything for granted. In 2016, one candidate running for the Republican nomination described our current president as a chaos candidate, and if elected, he would be a chaos president. Can anyone now seriously argue against this proposition? Of course, in 2016, the president was a private citizen and thus was unaccountable for the chaos he caused. And these traits of the man who would become the standard bearer of my party were bad enough when exhibited by a mere candidate for president. In 2016, it was bad enough when, for months in advance of the election, the Republican nominee for president claimed falsely that the coming election would be rigged. Now, as President of the United States, he has said, and I quote, "The only way we're going to lose this election is if the election is rigged." What kind of president talks like that? What kind of American leader undermines confidence in the elections in his own country as part of his strategy to hold power? This is extraordinarily dangerous to a free society, and it stands to inflict lasting damage to our democracy. It was bad enough when, as a candidate, he attacked a federal judge because of his heritage, saying that Judge Gonzalo Curiel could not preside fairly over a certain case because Curiel's parents were from Mexico. As president, he has only intensified his attack on judges. He has interfered in cases involving his friends and threatened jail for his opponents, demonstrating how little he knows or appreciates about the independent administration of justice in America. In 2016, it was bad enough for a mere candidate for president to sweet-talk the Russian dictator, calling Vladimir Putin a, quote, strong leader for his people, as if his people had a say in the matter. Watching that man as president stand with Putin at Helsinki and take the dictator's side, defying his own intelligence community and denying the ongoing Russian attacks on our elections, was shocking and appalling. In that moment, and in so many other inexplicable moments of deference to dictators, the President of the United States degraded his office and diminished America's role as leader of the free world. It was bad enough when in 2016, as a candidate, he resorted to calling his opponents childish names. That behavior in a president, which has only gotten worse, is an embarrassment to the office. Do any of us want our children to emulate this behavior? I could go on, but the litany is all too familiar. It is apparent by now that the president's behavior has not and will not change, whatever hopes we Republicans might have entertained about the office changing the man. Now, some of my conservative friends will say, yes, we don't like his behavior, but he governs as a conservative. Here today, I will say to my fellow conservatives, whatever else you might call the behavior I have just described, it is most assuredly not conservative. Indifference to the truth or to the careful stewardship of the institutions of American liberty is not conservative. Disregard for the separation of powers, the centerpiece of our constitutional system, is not conservative. Governing by tweet is not conservative. It's not even governing. And to the refrain, well, it's all about the Supreme Court, I say, to fall back on Supreme Court appointments as the last remnant by which we define a once vibrant conservative movement should offer little solace to conservatives. Now, three conservative principles have defined and animated the Republican Party over the past several decades: belief in limited government, commitment to free trade, and a recognition that strong American leadership around the globe makes America a more secure nation and the world a better place. So how are we doing with those principles? Well, we were running trillion-dollar deficits even before the coronavirus hit us. We have destroyed foreign markets for our goods and our services. We have threatened security agreements that have kept the peace for nearly 3/4 of a century. We have offended allies who we will desperately need to face China and other long-term threats to our security and prosperity, and for no good reason. Can any of us stand here today and claim that our party has remained faithful to the conservative principles during the president's time in office? No, we cannot. If we are honest, there is less of a conservative case to be made for re-electing the president than there is just a blatant appeal for more rank tribalism and further division and more willful amnesia in the face of more outlandish presidential behavior. I cannot and will not be a part of that. There is simply no future in it. To my fellow conservatives and Republicans who, like me, believe in the power of conservative ideas, ask yourself, will we be in a better position to make the conservative case for governing after 4 more years of this administration? I think we all know the answer to that. So here we are today. During the 2016 election, given what I had already seen during the campaign, I knew I could not vote for the president. Like many of my colleagues, I chose to vote for a third-party candidate. Today, given what we have experienced over the past 4 years, it's not enough just to register our disapproval of the president. We need to elect someone else in his place, someone who will stop the chaos and reverse the damage. Now, putting country over party has a noble history here in Arizona. In 1992, Mr. Republican Barry Goldwater endorsed a Democrat running for Congress over a Republican who he felt would not represent the party well. Goldwater hadn't traded in his conservative credentials. Far from it. He simply believed that in that case, that the conservative cause would be better served over the long term if the Democrat prevailed. And that's what I believe today in this election. And that is what a growing number of Republicans believe and are declaring today as well. I have never before voted for a Democrat for president. But I've been asked many times over the past 4 years if I, as a conservative, could vote for a Democrat for president. Sure has been my ready answer if he or she were a Joe Biden kind of Democrat. Well, the Democratic Party just nominated a Joe Biden kind of Democrat, whom I am confident will approach the constitutional role with the reverence and dignity it deserves. I know that he will reach across the aisle because that's what he's done his entire career. After the turmoil of the past 4 years, we need a president who unifies rather than divides. We need a president who prefers teamwork to tribalism. We need a president who summons our better angels, not a president who appeals to our baser instincts. That's why we need Joe Biden. If we have learned anything over the past 4 years, it is that character matters. Decency matters. Civility never goes out of style. And we should expect our president to exhibit these virtues. I have known Vice President Biden for 2 decades now. I served with him in Congress for much of that time. He is a good and decent man. I haven't always agreed with him, and there will be many policies on which we will disagree in the future, and that's okay. The steadiness of leadership and the health and survival of our democracy, those things far supersede any policy issues on which we might disagree. On this much, I know, with Joe Biden as president, we will be able to preserve the civic space wherein Republicans and Democrats can go back to merely disagreeing about issues of policy without fear of revenge or reprisal. That day cannot come soon enough. And so it is because of my conservatism and because of my belief in the Constitution and in the separation of power, and because I am gravely concerned about the conduct and behavior of our current president, that I stand here today, proudly and wholeheartedly, to endorse Joe Biden as the next president of the United States of America. America's best days are ahead. Go, Joe. Thank you very much.